the cloud. All right. Welcome back for another episode of the Rebel Talk podcast. I am your host, Dr. Michelle Paris, and I am so very excited to welcome this week's guest, Chana Ross, to the podcast. Chana and I have been speaking for the last hour. So needless to say, I could speak with this woman forever because she's a total light. She's a badass boss babe. She is just disrupting in her industry and she's a really inspiring woman. And so I can't think of a better human being to have on the podcast right now. We've stepped away from interviews a little bit and now we're rolling on back in. And one of my first and very favorite humans is Chana. So I'll let her introduce herself a little bit, but welcome.
Oh my goodness. Thank you. I'm so happy to be here. I'm very honored to be one of the returning guests, I guess, for your interview process. And I'm very excited to sit and chat with you, even though we've just chatted for a whole hour. To keep going. So thank you.
We did that so we could go deep back, you know? we got all the light stuff out of the way.
We got through the chit chat.
Yeah, we chit chatted. So, but for everyone else who may not know the magical unicorn that you are, give us a little story about how you came to physiotherapy, pelvic floor in particular, and being the clinic director at Vital Physiotherapy. Just give us the background story.
So my name is Chana Ross. Most people can't pronounce my name without horking, so I go by Chana. I am a mom of 4, and I've been a physiotherapist for a very long time at this point. And about I want to say 7 years ago, I was almost about to leave the field and go into medicine because while I loved helping people, I just felt like it just became a little shoulder, a knee, an ankle, and it sort of became like I lost the drive for the person-centric care. I felt like I just wasn't finding that anymore. And I had just had my second baby, and I was having a lot of pelvic pain. And I had gone to my OB and then had gone to my GP, and they sent me for a bunch of tests, and everything came back negative. And they're like, "You're fine." But I was in pain. Like I was having pain with intercourse. I was having back pain. I was having hip pain. And really, like, I did not feel okay. And I just kept being told by the medical system that, like, what did you expect? You just had a baby. Of course things are going to feel not great down there. And a friend of mine who had been working with at a physio clinic, she was another physiotherapist. She had just gotten trained in this like thing called pelvic physio. And for those of you who don't know what pelvic physio is, we call ourselves the gynecologist to physiotherapists. So we can do internal, vaginal, and rectal assessments. So my friend had just gotten trained. She was like, "Chana, trust me, come, I'm gonna assess you, and I'm gonna fix it." And I was like, "You are going nowhere near me with those fingers, okay?" So after a little bit of cajoling, I went to see her, and it literally changed my life. Of course, I had to do some homework, and there was some stuff on my part that had to get done. But all of a sudden, I went from feeling like my body was not mine, it wasn't functioning well. There was this experience of like, who am I? And I was really given like a second lease on life. I later had 2 more children, so obviously things were working. And I went for pelvic physio both before and after each one of those pregnancies. But I was looking at what she did, and there was like this duality of me not feeling fulfilled in the area that I was working in anymore, and also the fact that pelvic floor physio had truly changed my life. And I was like, I can talk about vaginas all day, and I want to help people change their lives. And I was like, I'm going to do this. So I went and I got trained, and continuously keep getting trained because I'm a little bit of a obsessive on getting, learning more and more and more. And I started seeing clients. I bought a massage table and I was going to people's homes and treating them in their homes. And like when people ask me, like, how did you get your first client? It was literally because I was just screaming from the rooftops about pelvic physio. I'd make people uncomfortable in conversations, telling me like, hey, how are you? I'm like, great. This crazy thing happened. Like this woman that performed gynecological physiotherapy on me and it changed my life. And some people would get weirded out and move away from the conversation. And others were like, wow, tell me more. And I slowly built up a client base because, like people are really uncomfortable talking about these things and I am not. So we, slowly but surely I built up from this, home-based physiotherapy practice. Then I rented a space for myself and eventually opened this clinic in Midtown Toronto that just solely focuses on women's health and pelvic health. And we have a whole multidisciplinary team and a whole team of pelvic physios who I have, trained in our methodology and our like care focused practice. And that brings us to today.
Well, it's such an empowering story. And I was thinking about like, you can't unlearn when you learn something new that like revolutionizes your world. Right. And so I think,
100%.
some of the most passionate, fascinating people to learn from are the ones who've truly been transformed through something themselves that they've gone through and then gone through all of the extra education to be able to bring that to the masses. And I think what I admire about you so much is just the way you do shine a light on that and the way you empower women by the masses to be able to create a bigger voice for pelvic floor physiotherapy. Because if we're really, dissecting this, like 10 years ago, is that really much of a conversation? And now really it's becoming, I don't think we're there yet, which is a part of the discussion we're going to have.
Yeah.
But, a lot of my female patients now are coming to me and they're like, and I see women, typically they're pregnant or newly postpartum, and like pelvic floor physio is already part of their team. And I'm like,
Yes.
okay, like this is vastly different than me being like, well, here's your pamphlet and I'm going to explain, just be forewarned, there is a physical exam. Like now, like we're becoming so much more well-versed in this area of women's health, which I think is so important. And, pain is often a way to force us to have to make a change. And so I find that really, inspiring that this is, birthed a really revolutionary practitioner. And, I think what you've done that's so cool, which I want to talk about a little bit before we get into the meaty bits, but is how you, like in a pandemic, you took something that was very much an in-person experience and took that virtual. And I think you're a bit of a trailblazer here that, you took a model that, people couldn't see it being any other way. And we've talked a couple of times through this pandemic and you were like, I pivoted from like 7 p.m. to midnight. And the next day I was virtual. And it was like, women like you are really exciting to learn from, because that is, I'm sure those first few calls were like, say what? We're like virtually doing pelvic floor. So can you tell us how you, took this model and transformed this so that you could serve more and be able to care for those in pain who are unable to access care in this really crucial time? And this may not be the last time that this happens. So I think this is a really relevant part of medicine and a really relevant part for people to know that they can contact you at your clinic and be able to access this care. Or what are your regulations? Like, who can you treat? Is it within province?
Within the province. Yeah, we can treat within the province. One of the really, when I train my physios, who are all, they're all trained by like our governing bodies and all those pieces, but when they come in to my, to my clinic, nobody starts seeing clients until they've really been trained by me. And one of the biggest things that we talk about is how we provide care. We care for people. So above all else, we need to make sure that the person in front of us, usually they're in a state where they've just been dismissed multiple times. And so they need to be seen, they need to be heard. And we treat based on this, on a biopsychosocial model of care, meaning your biology, your physical body, your muscles, your ligaments, your tendons interact and respond to your psychology, your state, your mental health, and your social interactions, right? Which is, why Rebel Tribe is so amazing and it amplifies people's health so much, because it's really a missing piece in a lot of the healthcare that we provide. So when we're seeing clients, we're not, although we're providing them with hands-on treatment, and it's hands-on treatment in areas that they aren't necessarily so in touch with, I train people all the time. So this way that I train my clinicians, I give them advice, they try it, and then they come back and report. So I know how to teach people about their pelvic health anyhow. So we started to take this model of how we train our clinicians and then model that with our clientele. And the really interesting piece about all of this is that it's really disrupted physiotherapy, because there's a lot of effort put into manual therapy and getting hands-on manual therapy coursework and education. And when it comes to reasons why, when we look at the evidence why people actually get better, massive piece of that is the person's belief that they're going to get better. So if they walk in, knowing you and trusting you, believing you're going to get better, you already are going to have a better results. A massive piece is their relationship, the therapeutic relationship, right? And when you look at the overall reason why somebody gets better, getting them to move, novel movement, getting their brain to think about something, movement differently and experience it in a safe way is massive. And only 15% of the reason why somebody gets better is because of the hands-on manual treatment that you've chosen.
Wow.
1-5. So if we can build a strong relationship with our clients, yes. If we can get them moving in a novel way. So, a lot of the times I'll tell clients, we're going to rebrand your vagina for you, right? If your brain thinks that something, pain is a danger signal. Thank you. Pain is a danger signal. So if your brain is anticipating that some touch in and around, your genitals, is that something touching that area is dangerous, like after somebody delivers a baby, that although it's normal and natural and beautiful, it is still traumatic for the pelvic floor muscles, which are the muscles at the base of our pelvis. Like our vagina is made up of muscle. So if at postpartum, the last thing your brain remembers is something that was traumatic, it's going to go into this protective response, which is clenching that happens unconsciously. We need to retrain that whole, your brain, that touch in that area is safe. And that can be done virtually, because we're just teaching clients how to train their brains. So it's a big differentiator between something being all in someone's head versus being brain driven. And the brain is plastic, so we can really retrain and re-educate. Right.
That's so brilliant. And I love the way that you just laid that out for us, that, we all think of physiotherapy as a manual experience, right? And so when we think, the benefit of that is that we go there, you do something to my physical body, and therefore I heal.
Yeah.
So breaking it down and really, because that makes so much sense to me, that's only 15% of the experience. We know it's the relationship. We know that. And that makes so much sense to me as a naturopathic doctor, the piece about trauma, which I want to get into a little bit about our perception of our vulva and our vaginal, disconnection. But right? That is a huge piece. And that being the most plastic piece in terms of how we heal and how we rewire and how we transform and move forward. I mean, that transcends space, right? Like
Yeah.
that doesn't need to be done. That needs to be done with someone you trust and that you want to work with, who you believe can get you results, and not selecting the person who's down the street just because the location is there.
Yes, 100%.
Mic drop. That was so good.
I mean, a lot of our research is in low back pain. Low back pain is the number one reason that people go into their doctor's offices.
Right.
And when you go to like a million different clinics, everybody's using different methodologies to get people better. And our research in low back pain is actually just getting them moving and doing different movements is actually what gets people better, right? And so if we can start to take a step back and stop thinking about how we as practitioners fix people, right? We're not fixers, we're coaches, right?
Yes.
We're here to teach and empower our clients in order to fix themselves. Because I don't want, like, yes, prenatally, postpartum, somebody has a new baby, is pregnant again. I'm going to help them prepare for labor and delivery and all those pieces. But at the end of the day, we see a lot of clients who have had years and years and years and years of pelvic pain. And what they've been told is, take this pill, here, do this, here, do that. I'm going to help you. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. And what we do differently is we say, I'm going to give you the tools to help yourself so that when you have a flare, you've got a list of things that you can just check off and say, okay, it's a flare. I know that healing is, I'm realizing it's a podcast. So I'm moving my hands up, waving up and down.
You can watch us on YouTube now.
Amazing.
I can see the hand.
Healing's not linear, right? Like you're going to have good days. You're going to have bad days. As long as we're trending in the right direction, I don't want my clients to say, oh my God, my back pain is back. I have to go see Chana. No, my back pain is back. Chana has given me these tools. I'm going to try my list of 5 things that I know is going to get me better. And then if, after a couple of days, I need some fine tuning, they're going to come back in and see me. I don't want my clients to be reliant on me. I want them to be empowered to take control of their own health, because that's what actually helps heal people. Like their level of self-efficacy is a massive differentiator in terms of how well they do later on in life, right?
Yeah, it's the whole teach them to fish premise, right?
Amen.
And it's actually so brilliant because and that's probably why we love each other so much and get along, because
we do.
Yeah, because we see healthcare the same way. It's that if we actually could revolutionize the way we are delivering care so that people could feel empowered in the process and heal themselves, then they would be more engaged and they would get better results. If we keep being reliant on the pill or the practitioner, we're just not going to get anywhere. And it's meeting the brick wall all the time and wondering what is it about me that's not working? It's the methodology behind it that's not working for you. It wasn't supposed to. And I think, okay, I could go so many ways right now. I'm going to say one little quick thing and then go to where I want to go next. What is, did you call it novel movement?
Yes.
Let's break that down for people.
Okay. So the pain system, we think that you touch a hot stove, there's inputs into your hand that say, hot, danger, 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 danger. And your brain comes and says, okay, you're in pain. There's no pain system. There's no pain, there's no pain like neurons that go to your brain and say pain, 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 pain in your hands. What happens is our brain gets information from our body, from our skin, from different areas of our body about noxious stimuli, the possibility of something that is kind of yucky, right? And then our brain takes that information in and says, is this important? Is it not important? Have I experienced this before? Did I sleep last night? What's my nervous system doing? Is it upregulated, which means we're in fight or flight already, so we're already searching for possible dangers? Or, am I relaxing in bed and everything is calm? And it will take all the information that it has and determine, is this dangerous or not? If it decides with all the different inputs, and our hormone levels, it's pretty complex, if this is dangerous, you're going to experience pain. So if it decides it's not dangerous, you actually get another signal back down to that area where you got that information from, and it says, shut up. I don't want to hear about that anymore. So for example, in the morning, you put on your shirt. You actually feel the shirt initially when you put it on. Once your brain says, okay, what is this? It's a shirt. Great. Is there any danger? Nope. Stop. Like, I don't want to hear that anymore. I don't want to, like, your brain has so much to do throughout the day. It actually wants to shut down information, because otherwise it'd be information overload if all day long you're walking around saying, I'm wearing a shirt, I'm wearing a shirt, I'm wearing a shirt. Like, it would just be too much, right? So you actually, you become less and less aware of the fact that you have a shirt on. I mean, you don't think you're naked, but you're not hyper aware of those, of the tissue touching your body.
Yeah.
Right. So what we can do is, if, for example, it hurts to move your wrist and bend it in a certain direction, and every time you bend in that direction, your brain says danger, 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 danger. What we can do is we can start to introduce movement that is like that bending your wrist, but is in a different way, so that your brain doesn't have any background information on the fact that that's actually dangerous, right? So because the pain system it gives you information about either actual true danger or the possibility of true danger, we can experience pain when there's no actual physiological issues happening, right? So something can hurt in my back, and sometimes that means there's a disc. Other times that means my whole system is ramped up, and so my brain is now hypervigilant and is looking for danger, right? So what we have to do is actually turn down the nervous system and introduce movement in a way that my brain has not already determined is dangerous. So something that's a novel movement is, if bending my wrist, like, down, makes my brain say that there's danger, or determines that there's danger, maybe I'm going to do a dance where I'm twisting my wrists around, which goes into that same position, but is not me doing this movement all the time. And if I twist my wrists around, we go through the range of motion that has been deemed unsafe before. But because it's a novel movement, your brain now says that's safe. But we start to now pattern that motor pathway as safe, so that eventually we can start to go back to do that same movement, and that's going to be deemed safe. So we do the same thing with your vulva and vagina. We just have to introduce new ways of touching or moving, so that your brain has not already said that that's dangerous. I don't know if that makes sense.
So much sense. It's like, I kept thinking, like, yes, I love these conversations because I appreciate people who are fascinating. Like, I love people so passionate about what they do that they just, like, spew off like you just did. Like, it was so good. Like,
Deep into
because I totally, you paint a picture for me, and then I think, gosh, not to insult anything else, but like any other care that isn't really addressing pain in that fashion is missing it.
Yeah.
And I can see it from a perspective from naturopathic medicine in terms of how we speak to the stress response and that fight or flight system. We're not often talking about it from a pain perspective. We're talking about it from like a nervous system similar, but like why people can't sleep, why they can't poop, why they can't, manage their anxiety, right? So it just, like, it really solidified a lot of ideas in terms of how I even would refer to a physiotherapist, because that makes so much sense. And I think, like I said earlier on, like, you can't unlearn something once it comes to your attention. So I think about people who suffer with chronic fatigue, or people who have this pain response, and then they think of you if there's another pain, and they're like, how do I create novel movement? How do I, you just like empowered that person to think about the perception of pain in a much more empowered way of, like, which I think is what we're trying to teach women in Rebel Tribe, is like, how does your intuitive self, like, how does your physiology connect with your intuition? How is pain, how is an expression of a symptom trying to get your attention to tap into your body? And like, I just like loved that.
Thank you. So like, pain can be the perception. It's like true danger or perceived danger. And if you have chronic fatigue, if you've got all of these pieces, right? IBS, like, there's a whole bunch of different conditions which tend to trend with sympathetic overload, right? That fight or flight. And you think about it, like when you haven't slept, your pain's going to be worse, right? If your bowels aren't working, your pain's going to be worse. Like all of these things happen together, and we've just been dealing with it in silos, but it's one big, I would say one big happy package, but it is. And then it becomes less overwhelming for our clients when we start to understand that, like, you don't have this issue and this issue and this issue and this issue and this issue. This is a whole body experience, right? Like that's why we call it biopsychosocial, right? Like all of these pieces work together. You're not a brain, a heart, an arm. You're human. So let's treat you like you're a human.
I love that. Obsessed with that. Okay. So, quickly, because you talk to women about vaginas and vaginal health and vulvas and, can you unpack this a little bit? Because I find this really fascinating. Like, it's still a giggle fest when we get to this topic in Rebel Tribe. It's still very much a disconnect. Women still don't look at their vulva. Why are we so disconnected from this? Where is the guilt or the shame? And this is a big question, but I'm just curious for someone who spends a lot of their time talking about this aspect of women's health, if you've noticed any trends or anything that's like, that's interesting. I wonder if there's more there.
I think it for me, and I come actually from a very conservative background, right? So, take this or leave this. But what I find is that we actually spend a lot of time when we're learning about our vaginal health, just talking about reproduction. We actually we don't set women up for success by educating them about their actual anatomy. We talk about a vagina. We don't talk about vulva, right? Women don't know that their labia are. They think that everything is just called a vagina. Yeah. It's not, right? What's interesting is this is very similar to pain science, where we find that there's a lot of research on if you teach people actual pain science, they have less pain, right? If we teach women about their anatomy, they're going to feel less icky about it, right? Because it's unknown. All they know is that, I bleed once a month. I'm supposed to be penetrated. And it takes me a really long time to orgasm. And, it takes, if I have a male partner, it takes them about 4 minutes, right? Like they work better than we do.
Right.
Right. And it's not better or worse. It's just no one's ever told us that, actually the mean time for the average time it takes for a woman to actually reach orgasm is between 20 and 40 minutes. You're working okay. But we don't learn about the clitoris. We don't learn about our vulva. There's this feeling that this is other because we've learned about vagina, we've learned about penis, and so it's this male anatomy as the norm, and we're this other. And when we talk about the sexual response, when we talk about all of these pieces, a lot of what we've learned has been based on male physiology and anatomy, and no one's actually stopped and taught us about what does the female anatomy actually look like? What should it feel like? What is normal and what is abnormal? So basically anything that we feel, we just assume it's totally normal. Oh yeah, my best friend, she would miss 2 days of school because she was throwing up and on her floor, in her bathroom when she had her period every month. Yeah, some women just have that. Nope, not normal. Why are we accepting that, right? Well, of course, during pregnancy, you have terrible back pain and you can't walk, and your care provider told you that your pubic symphysis is separated. Your pelvis has separated. That's what we're telling women during pregnancy. And, right? And they're like, well, I'm pregnant. What am I supposed to do? Well, let's actually educate children or young adults about their anatomy, and it's going to feel less icky.
So this brings us, I love that, because I think this is a real area to unpack for women. And I think we realize that this is something that needs to be addressed and we need to give voice to, because I think you're right. It's like when you give things voice, when you understand it, you downregulate you demystify it.
Yes.
And demystifying things is important. And I even talk to like other naturopathic doctors, and I'm like, do you know the Latin translation of the word vagina? And they're like, no, it means sheath for a sword. It's literally the possession of a male. And so, like, of course we are like so disconnected. Like, we're not having these conversations. So in Rebel Tribe, we call them yoni because they're the sacred space, and
I
like
love it.
the womb, and the, you know, it's just like, it sounds much more loving.
Yes, I love it.
And something you can feel connected to. And, you know, we evolved even what we're doing there. And I'm showing women pictures of vulvas because I thought, you know, the Goop series that did that was really informative because a lot of women have shame around that. And I think it's important to start demystifying these things and properly teaching anatomy and having, you know, more noble conversations. Because you're right, I think there's a lot of guilt around what we're taught and what we experience, and then we're not, you know, we don't know who to go to have these conversations. And so yeah, I think that's super helpful as someone who spends a lot of their time in this area of health and talking to women about these concerns. I appreciate your insight because I think it's an area where we need to do better and serve women in a capacity that helps them feel more deeply connected to this, because having great sex and having, you know, feeling connected to your body and just feeling like your functionality is there is so key for like good quality healthcare. And I think we're just not knowing to ask for that or demand that for ourselves. And so that leads
100%.
me into our next topic so beautifully. That worked out really well. Thank you. Because you know where we're going. But, you know, when we were talking about what do we want to talk about, gosh, we had like no shortage, did we? You know, you brought up the idea of like women accepting subpar health, and you talking about, you know, what you were doing was feeling less patient centric, and now you've evolved to a model that is so patient centric. Like, what do you, can we talk about this a little bit? Because I agree, you know, women may not opt to invest or learn more about pelvic floor health or naturopathic medicine because we think of this as like an extra cost or, you know, excessive, and we need to reframe that narrative. And so I think you are the perfect woman to have that conversation with. So tell us your thoughts about that, because I think that's a really important conversation.
What's interesting is, so we, you know, I will say the majority of our practice is female identifying. There is a large portion who are non-binary, and another portion that are men with pelvic health issues. And what I find what's interesting is like male identifying people will come in because they are having pain or they're having issues with sex. Okay, whatever kind of sex they're having. Women, and then we'll sort of probe a little bit, and we'll talk. You know, we'll get to like urinary incontinence, and they're like, "Oh yeah, I've been dribbling for a couple of years, but I'm really here because I can't have sex." Great. Women or female identifying people will come in because, you know, after cajoling and educating them a lot that leaking of any kind, even if you're coughing while you're on a trampoline with a full bladder and your child has pushed you and your friend says something funny, is not normal. It's not normal to leak under any circumstances. So they're like, "Hey, Chana, I heard your talk, came in." Okay. Once we're like, well, let's say 45 minutes into our initial consultation, we'll start to talk about sex. And they're like, "Oh yeah, sex has been painful for years, but that's normal because I've had a baby." Right? And so it's so interesting to see what we're willing to live with, and what is important to us. And very often their relationship is floundering because there's this missing piece, and there's shame and guilt, and, you know, they feel really terrible that they're like, okay, just close their eyes and get it over with. When it comes to being intimate with their partner. And there's a lot of, you know, it's really interesting that was not enough of that wasn't something that was important enough to actually come in for. the fact that they're going for a run with their friends and they have a wet spot on their pants at the end, you know, that is enough to come and to be seen for. And so I think that we've normalized a lot of things that are actually not normal. And we as women, like, we just end up we just drop down further and further and further on the list, because we've been educated that a good mother or a good, you know, to be a good person, you put other people first.
Right.
You know, and it's the analogy of put your gas mask on first and then put on, you know, then you put on your child's or your partner's gas mask, or oxygen mask, I should say.
Right.
It's a pandemic, so whatever, it can all work. But it's fascinating to me. And, you know, and I think about this for myself and how I approach my health as well. And I'm still really learning and working through this, very much so as well. But this idea that we're so willing to allow certain pieces of our health, which, by the way, are so simple to treat, right? It takes time and it takes effort, but you do not have to live with back pain, hip pain, leaking urine. You don't have to live with constipation. You don't have to live with hormone imbalances. There are actually pretty, like, half the time when I'm working with my clients, I'm like, all right, so you need to drink more water. Like, these things are simple, but they're not easy.
Yes.
And it takes them coming in to see somebody like you or me for them to actually value taking care of themselves. And it's fascinating, but I think that the more that we work with our clients and they're like, and they see how their lives are truly changed, the quality of their lives. Like, when we're working as a pelvic health physio, like, we're working with women, like, the 5 roles of the pelvic floor are to hold in urine and feces, to help with sexual function, to hold up your organs, to work as, like, your core, to make sure that your core muscles are working, right? Like, these are pretty basic things. And yet we're so willing to minimize our needs because we have a baby and my baby needs, you know, and all of my baby's needs is met all the time. I don't know what the solution is, except to continue educating, you know, family, friends, clients, and help ask them to educate their family, friends, and their colleagues about the fact that, like, there is so much we can do. And it's not, you know, they don't need to have major surgery, because the first thing that they're going to go in to see their GP, they're going to be sent to your gynecologist. They're going to have bladder lift surgery, which, by the way, in 55 years, 50% of those fail, right? Like, we're willing to take these massive leaps before we lay the foundation.
It goes back to, like, still putting the health in your hands of the expert, instead of realizing that you play a big role in your healthcare because no one's told you that you can. Yeah. And I actually, you're right. Like, it's a fundamental issue that you're bringing up, and it really takes, like, breaking this archetype of celebrating women for being selfless.
Yes.
So reading books like Untamed seems very suitable. Yeah, because, and I do see this shift, but it's going to be a slow burn, right? Yeah. Like, it's going to take a long time to, like, rewrite new pathways to, like, the plasticity of that, right? This is intergenerational, that we've been ingrained that women are very sacrificial for and care for everybody else, because we are naturally nurturing, and that's where things have gotten confusing, because then that's flipped into, well, I sacrifice the cost of myself to serve. And so I think the more and more we have these kind of conversations, the more women digest different content, the more they realize that breaking that archetype is essential for fundamental health, because it is, when you say that, it's like we start to accept that dysfunction is function, and that's totally what we do.
Yeah.
We will live with uncomfortable sex for years. Women will pee their pants for years before doing something about it. Right. So
it needs to be like a straw that breaks the camel's back, sort of thing. But what I tell my clients on their initial consultation is, I'm like, listen, like, we're going to change your life. Here's how we're going to do it. I'm going to give you homework. you're going to go home, you're going to do the homework, you're going to get better, but then please go out and tell people that I helped you, that I changed your life, right? Give me the credit when you do all the work, so that at least, because quite honestly,
that is the most brilliant business model I've ever heard.
Well, the thing is, like, I do think that people it is easier to come to somebody who you think is going to help you, and then we ease you into the fact that you're going to take control of your health. If somebody comes in and we're like, it's the same idea as like, yeah, like eat well and exercise daily, but like maybe I'll just use Dr. Ho's, shaker, and I'm going to lose all the calories. Like, no, like you put that on and then you walk around and that's the exercise, but really we've made you believe that it's the product that's going to help you.
Yeah.
But the reality is that we need to take the onus on helping ourselves, but it needs to be baby steps. Like, the idea that we're going to take control of everything, it's too overwhelming, right? So we need to just slowly integrate our health into our hands and away from practitioners fixing us, because nobody knows our bodies better than we do, and nobody knows better than let me take that again. Nobody just knows what we need and what our body needs better than we do. And so it's like tapping, it's finding that intuition and finding that inner voice again, and listening to our bodies is one of the most important things that we can do. But sometimes we need a helping hand to find that.
I think always, right? That's why community is essential. That's why we need a coach. That's why we need someone like yourself who's disrupting the model so that there's different ways to access care, because at different times you're going to need different things, but you need a person you trust to hold space to allow you to transform, because transformation takes time and practice, but the onus really is on the person. But I am happy to give you all the credit. Yeah, like
a magic wand.
We'd all love that. But that I think that's where the old model is probably getting in the way, because we're still some people, and it's not pointing a finger. I mean, we're all doing the best we can with the information we have, but like, it's still encouraging this perception that if I go somewhere, someone will heal me and my life will be great without taking any self-ownership, which is probably why also people accept subpar health, because that sounds intimidating. So I also think what's really lovely about having different ways which people can engage in healthcare helps empower people to start learning this information at a rate that feels consumable and safe for them, so they don't totally turn a blind eye to it, right? We can't have, like, it's taken me forever to hear what Megan was saying. Okay, Dr. Megan Walker, like, we talk like, she's here. Like all we've ever really offered people were 3 different coffee sizes: small, medium, and large, right? Do you want this visit, or this visit? What if we transformed this model and said, how about these are different ways you can consume healthcare. Yes. How about these are different ways you can engage in the process, so that if, one-on-one that you're not ready for, but let's say Chana Ross offers us a 4-week program on pelvic health. Yes. Let me even get comfortable with the use of the word vagina or vulva. Right. Yes. So like, I think we have to disrupt the model, and that's what's going to help us. So we have to get louder, and we have to provide different ways for people to access care, so that they realize that they are in the driver's seat of this, and they can pick when and how they engage. If you only provide 3 different cups of coffee, that's just going to turn a lot of the mass away, or just pick a model that's already being done, because they don't have to think about it. Right.
And that's what I love about virtual care, is that the actual act of coming into clinic was challenging for many people. Finding childcare, physically traveling to the space, it actually makes it more accessible, which makes it more likely that somebody's going to continue and be successful, right? If there's so many barriers to entry, we're not giving our clients the opportunity to be successful.
Yeah, 100%. And I had some patients express, Michelle, I'm not coming back. Yeah. I'm going to wait for our visit in my office, have our visit and move on, right? Save myself the 40-minute drive. And I get that, and every once in a while you might want to come in and connect and hang out, but it's not always going to be necessary. So I think, yeah, as we ease into this new phase of life, as we come out of this cocoon, which was a pandemic of like hibernation a little bit, I think it allowed a lot of us to have an opportunity to see things clearly and be plunked out of our life to see the opportunity in which we could disrupt a medical model that was not serving the mass, right? Like we were serving a part of the population that understood what we were all about. And now we have a different way that we can reach more people and empower women to start thinking about pain as a metric of how their body's speaking to them versus
it's just information, right?
Yeah. And
I mean, we get to participate in our healthcare. We should participate in our healthcare.
If you want transformation,
yes,
it's essential.
Yeah.
You were, literally the perfect woman to have on for this conversation.
What?
Okay, 2 questions.
Yes.
Is there an experience in your life that upon reflection, looking back on it, you're incredibly grateful for? So it could have been what at the time looked like a big mistake, but now you look at it as like a learning lesson, or you're like incredibly grateful that you had that because it literally changed the trajectory of how you did things?
I'm going to say my first birth, because when I went in just thinking like it was a regular, it was in the hospital. I had a male OB. I had my husband with me. My mom came to support me. But before I delivered, instead of going to the in-hospital birth classes, I actually did one-on-one labor, like birth classes with a doula. And I'm going to be honest with you, I'm just going to frame this for everybody. I have 4 children. My eldest one is 12 years old. So this was 13 years ago. It felt like, to me, I felt like it was very airy-fairy. Like it didn't quite meet me where I was at the time, working with this doula who was teaching me all this like labor and delivery prep stuff. But what ended up happening was my water broke and there was meconium in my water. So it was green. TMI. Sorry, that's what I do for a living. Okay, great.
It's important. A lot of women are like, yep, me too. Me too, by the way.
Yep. And so I had this idea that I was going to like labor at home and out the window, meconium in my water. I knew that I had to go into the hospital. I was not having any contractions. I knew right away I was going to have to be induced. I was going to have to, and then because I was being induced, I was probably going to have an epidural because I was going to be bedbound. And like, I just knew that this meant this whole cascade of events, which devastated me because I had my mindset on this whole other birthing experience. And when we got to the hospital, I went through triage, and this resident came in and read my file and was like, okay, so you're here for a scheduled induction. And I'm fairly even keel, but like, I guess, labor and delivery does a little number on us. And I lost it at the resident. I told the nurse, that resident is not coming in again. I'm here because my water is broken. My child is possibly in distress, and didn't even take the time to read my file. And so I was livid. And we ended up not allowing that resident in. I was getting really, really pushed towards a C-section. And I just, like, I say I put on my big girl panties, but like, I was really pushing back and saying, is there anything else I can do? Is there anything else I can do? And the only reason why I even thought to ask that question was because of this doula's prenatal classes that I really thought were not, like, they did not meet me where I was at all. And I want to tell you something, like, so there was a changeover in staff. This new doctor came in, new nurse came in. That nurse was with me for 3 out of my 4 births. This nurse just took care of me and was like, don't worry. Like when it came time to push, they brought in the forceps, they brought in the vacuum, and she was like, we will not have that energy in here. And she sent them out of the room. And I'm just like, looking back, I don't know what came over me to like push back so much against this doctor and this resident, but it ended up being like this birth that I wouldn't have expected. I hear my clients' stories, and I would have had a C-section because they were just pushing, and I just became a bad patient. And I don't think of myself as somebody who is super vocal in those situations, but I'm grateful that I had this prenatal classes that empowered me to think somewhat differently. Like, even though my son is he's on the door right now, so there's some smashing in the background. My apologies.
You've been gone for 2 hours, mommy.
But because I did this thing that was outside of my wheelhouse, it allowed me to shift just enough to push against what would have otherwise been my instincts to allow to happen.
It's so funny you bring this up, because I am just doing a 3-part series for the podcast. So the first part will air right before this interview. And you're literally touching all the important points I thought I talked about and considering in your first trimester, like where you choose care. Do you talk about a doula? Does it matter to you that the same person is present throughout the process, right? Like all these things. So I totally, I hear you there. And it is funny because you can, like, for a lot of women, they do think this whole doula thing is like way out there. But then, the way she just gave you permission to advocate or have that conversation ahead of time, we don't realize until we're in the moment and we're not like literally able to articulate ourselves, like for ourselves. You realize, wow, that's why that moment is so essential. And that probably perpetuated your whole passion for wanting to give women voice to all of these aspects of this very critical time in a woman's life.
It literally laid the seeds for me. And I can only reflect back on it now and see how all those pieces sort of built on each other. There's really great research for doulas, just as a side note, having a support person present.
I had one with and one without, and I would never do it without ever. Although I'm done, but that's like, how really? I advocate for them. But if I had an accidental child, there would be a doula there.
Amen.
Okay, quickly. What makes you rebellious?
Oh my goodness. I like to think of myself as I have like one foot inside the box and one foot outside the box. I just like to ask why a lot. And I don't really like people's first responses when we talk. Like when I say, hey, how are you? And they're like, great. I'm like, actually, how are you? And so I guess I'm somewhat rebellious in that I want to go deep really quickly with people.
Love that. I promise to make the rapid fire really quick so your son can have your attention.
I just keep muting myself.
Okay, rapid fire questions, and I love that piece about you. Are you ready?
Bring it.
All right. What is your superpower?
I want to say I'm heart-centric. I try to approach everything from my heart.
I love that.
When
it comes to your health, and that's true. When it comes to your health, what gives you your superpowers?
When it comes to I want to say my kids, but I feel like that's just too cliche. When it comes to my health, I think my brain gives me my superpowers, trying to do what's best. For real, there's some seriousness happening in the background. I think I think that I will set an intention. I'll follow through. So, but then it also makes me choose not to do things a lot.
Yeah, like answer the door. Best piece of advice you've ever received? Not rapid fire and unfair under these circumstances for you. But Perhaps you can think about it.
Okay, so we're going to ignore the background knocking, but the best piece of advice I ever received was that when you're making decisions, it's either a hell yes or it's a no. And so as somebody who spends a lot of time like thinking and thinking and thinking, if something doesn't resonate as a hell yes, what I'm choosing, it's a no.
Oh, and are you good at listening to that? I'm so impressed. I love that. I resonate with it so much, but then I'm like, I forgot to say no again.
Have to be reminded of it often. But it's a mantra now at this point.
I love it. I love it. How do you define your tribe?
How do I define my tribe? I define my tribe by finding people who see me and who remind me of the value that I provide, and who also support me and give me permission to support them in a way that feels authentic and not hard. So I find my tribe by finding people who are easy to hang out with, but I feel better because I'm with them.
Love that. What do you do to fuel your wild heart?
Hang out with Michelle. But seriously, I mean, Dr. Michelle Paris, you will attest to this. I find people who really support me, and I just sort of hound them, and no, I'm just joking. I need a nice support system around me, and that's how I make it happen, virtually at this point.
Yes, virtually, but that's okay. You've been instrumental as an instrumental woman in my tribe, and so I really appreciate you, and I appreciate this conversation. I was leaned all the way in, which meant that was like a hell yes experience for me. Chana Ross, I adore you. I adore your brilliant brain. I love the way you think of healthcare. I love individuals who transcend their original, skill set and make it into something like so powerful, so meaningful, and so revolutionary. And so I am grateful to call you a friend and to be hang out with someone like so high vibration yourself, and someone who cares about women's health as much as you do. So when my audience wants to connect with you, how do they do that?
They can find, so first of all, thank you. They can find me at vitalphysiotherapy.com. On Instagram, we are at Vital Physiotherapy and Wellness. And we're still hanging out on Facebook. So we are at Vital Physiotherapy Toronto. And come say hi.
What are you, a dinosaur? Just kidding. We're all on Facebook.
My daughter's trying to get me to...
Okay, I have to say, please thank your children on behalf of everyone at the Rebel Talk podcast for hanging out with me for 2 hours. I love you, my friend. Thank you for your time. And I can't wait for people to connect with you and to send all the people your way, because you really help me understand what is so unique about what you do in terms of helping support women. So thank you for your time, and you guys have a wonderful day.
Thank you.